Welcome back to Tapp into Politics, the show where we have a real honest conversation about the headlines that are dominating the media and break down what that means for you. So welcome back, Mike Tapp, MP for Dover and Deal. And Mike, what I really wanted to talk about today is exactly that, breaking down some of the headlines which we've been saying online, but a lot of it isn't exactly clear, especially the stuff around political jargon, what's going through Parliament, and really just talk about what that's going to mean for your constituents and for our viewers. Yep. So following on from our conversation last week around immigration and finding an actual solution rather than just gimmicks that we've seen with the previous government, one of the really big pieces of news has been that the UK has convened the first ever, I think I'm correct in saying first ever, major international summit to tackle illegal migration. Yes. So that's involved over 40 countries and organisations, and it's been looking at kind of the root causes of this problem and how we can work collaboratively to finally see some real action. Yeah. And Mike, as the MP for Dover and Deal, this isn't just some political concept to you. I mean, you are on the front line. This is personal to you and to your constituents. It must be a bit of a relief to see not just some action being taken, but the UK really being at the forefront of this. Do you think we might actually see some progress?
Yes. The problem with this complex issue is you can't just look at it from a domestic angle. Of course there is that domestic smuggling gang issue that needs to be dealt with here by the National Crime Agency and the police and the security services. But the fact is, when a migrant sets off to come to the United Kingdom and make that perilous journey across the Channel, they have to cover a lot of ground, whether it's from Vietnam, whether it's from Afghanistan. We see people coming from many different places, including Africa. So we have to have those international relationships, what we call upstream. It's quite a strange way of sort of describing it, but that's the sort of industry word. And what we've seen here is putting aside gimmicks and slogans and getting 40 nations in the room, starting with politicians on Monday, and then it was the operational leads on Tuesday. And what that means is, for example, the head of the National Crime Agency and then their equivalents from those 40 countries. So what they were discussing was, how can we stop this flow coming through and reaching our borders, but also others as well, because there's investment in this issue from all the European nations, because we're all seeing it happening. And it's interesting that different nations have different approaches. And actually, if you're all singing off the same song sheet and looking at that evidential collection, but also the disruptive side, which we've talked about before, then we can start to see results. We've also put in £33 million investment to some of those nations, and that will see what we call CPS, International Liaison Officers. All sounds very serious, and that is important because, let's take the French, for example. It's the prosecutors that will make the decision on whether an investigation takes place, whereas here it will be the NCA and the police that will decide that, and then the CPS will make a decision with the law enforcement agency as to whether it goes to charge. So having those international officers working upstream with other nations' law agencies means that we'll start to see a more combined approach, and that's really important to combating this. It's not sexy, but it'll work. And of course, it will take time to have an impact, because that was the first big meeting, and we need to see those other nations legislating and making changes too.
This is kind of the beginning of a process, and it's really important, I think, to talk about the collaboration. And when we think of immigration, we think of the smashing the gangs. We often think of France, but actually it's a lot more countries that we need to engage with in this process. I think that's quite important.
France are obviously the final nation that people go to before they cross. And we've already seen, by the way, diplomatic efforts with the French where they're changing their laws for tackling small boats in shallow waters. That's going to be vital, because what we've seen up till now is the French standing there and not being able to do anything, when the ribs get into the water. So this gives them that extra power. And that's through diplomacy that law's being changed. It's not changed yet. We've also seen similar in Germany, where there were components such as engines and dinghies coming through Germany, stored in warehouses to end up in Calais. But the German laws didn't cover that. So now those components that can be used is a part of German law, so they can start taking on those criminal gangs there. We're also seeing changes in law in Italy from this diplomatic effort around illicit finances that the smuggling gangs are profiting from. So already in 9 months, we're seeing a fantastic influence from Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper in changing laws across Europe. It's really good.
Exactly. So around this diplomacy as well, and we've talked before about Ukraine and Keir being this leading statesman, and it is exactly that. I mean, you say these it's the legislation, it's the diplomacy which is actually leading to these policy changes. What makes me think when you say that, what I really think about is if we had a different leader at the helm, would we be having those successes? If we had someone like, Kemi Badenoch, who is famously unable to collaborate with anyone, or Nigel Farage, who I can't imagine him going into any kind of a European or international meeting and coming out with any kind of positive success.
Exactly. And I said in PMQs on Wednesday that what we saw from the last government was damaging keyboard diplomacy. And what I meant by that was essentially the leader and ministers and backbenchers, including the former MP for Dover and Deal, bashing the French and just attacking them on social media. That's not diplomacy. That's, child's play. Now we've got adults in the room who are putting that concerted effort into diplomacy, and it will see results in time, no doubt.
It's exactly that. And talking more about diplomacy, going back to another success, from last night, one of the really big announcements has been the tariffs. It's been this moment that we've all really been waiting for, kind of knowing that it would happen and watching on definitely with a bit of apprehension. We know that our economy will possibly be affected by the tariffs. And actually the reactions to the 10% announcement it's been quite mixed, but a lot of people have said that it's better than what they expected. And clearly that there have been successful behind the scenes talks and diplomacy. But I think it would be helpful for the sake of our viewers to just talk a little bit about the tariffs, what they mean for us, and what's the context behind it.
What I find fascinating before going into the context is the ability of Donald Trump to turn this into an almost reality TV styled event.
Yes.
Liberation Day, he called it. It's very clever. And to his base, that will be really well received, not across the whole political spectrum, of course. And we were worried, and of course we still are, that big tariffs could be put on this country for trade. Essentially, it's a tax on goods that are imported. And that's not good for our economy. What we've seen yesterday is a 10% tariff. That's the lowest across the world. Others have had the same, but it is the lowest across the world. The EU had a 20%, and there's some much higher. Now, it's not ideal. It's still not perfect. We are working hard for a new trade deal with the United States. That's ongoing. Hopefully within there, we can see those tariffs taken away or reduced. And the main effort from Johnny Reynolds and Keir Starmer is to get a deal that's good for this country, and they'll keep pursuing that. But I've been on news channels today, and there's a lot of questions, and I understand that. But unfortunately for them, the answers won't be there. And that's because, like we've said in previous shows, this isn't a government of commentators. There's no need to constantly say things. But also with negotiations, it's similar to diplomacy, where you keep your cards close to your chest because you don't want to...
Don't tweet about it.
Exactly. There's no need to do that. And, on news channels, there's no need to give constant updates because we need to get to the end point and then announce what we've managed to achieve. So it'll be frustrating for the media, but there will be some quiet around this before we get there.
It's interesting. Of course, it'll be frustrating for the media and for the journalists, so that's their job. But actually, I think when you think about the British people, I don't think it would be as kind of frustrating for the media. I mean, we understand that this is a really, really sensitive issue at a really turbulent time. Personally, and I know I can speak for lots of my friends, we all find it reassuring having a government that's sort of talk about adults rather than kind of having childlike tantrums on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really important that we do recognise that a lot of this stuff needs to be, for the sake of just actually having a good outcome, needs to be kind of kept close to the chest.
Yeah, and the sort of the media cycle today has been kind of odd, really, with lots of questions and not many answers, and all journalists understand why. But they still push, obviously, because they want that scoop, and that's what they're doing, and that's absolutely fine. But it's a professional government. We're not, exactly, Boris Johnson and Kemi Badenoch. We're Keir Starmer, and he is a statesman and a professional. Exactly,
he's a good example of how to do it.
Yeah.
So another thing, which I as a Labour member, I'm a proud member of a trade union. It's been amazing to see this government really get to grips with the issues facing working people, and the kind of barriers that so many people are facing. And some of the issues like low pay, exploitative contracts. And I found it, I'd be interested to know if you agree, really frustrating how Reform have voted against all of the measures like sick pay, maternity pay, and it's not just Reform who don't like maternity pay. Kemi Badenoch has come out against maternity pay as well, which I just find, I mean, it boils my blood. I think it's so regressive, and it's exactly the opposite of what the British people need and rightly want. And Reform haven't offered any alternatives. It's just like the NHS. They're willing to scrap it, but they're not willing to explain how they would actually support it and support us. I mean, I think it does beg the question, again, who are they actually on the side of? Because it's sure as hell not us.
Oh, it's definitely not working people. They're on the side of themselves, and they're only representing themselves. And like I said before, they wrap themselves in our flag, but they don't mean it. They're not patriots, and if they were, then they'd be voting for paternity leave, or better paternity leave, better maternity leave, for an increase in pay for 3 million hard-working people of £1,400 a year. That's massive, and the whole of Parliament should be getting behind that if they really care about working people. Bringing it down those NHS waiting lists is also vital, and we've achieved that already, or getting there, but we've certainly achieved a lot in just 9 months. There's, healthcare touches everyone. We've all got family members and friends that, or maybe yourself, that need that care quickly to save your life. And to have parties not get behind that, I find quite fascinating, actually. And this approach of potentially having to pay for your healthcare is ridiculous. And I'll say to the likes of Farage that not only is it an attack on hard-working people who might not have much money, it's also an attack on the more wealthy, because there's a lot with wealth that's not cash. So, property, etc. So they might not be able to afford some of this healthcare as well using an insurance-based system. So it's unpatriotic, it's anti-British. NHS is at the core of what we stand for, and that's decency and looking after each other. Another thing that's wound me up over the last few months, particularly for those in Dover and Deal, is the Fire and Rehire vote that, again, they voted against. And look, we saw outrage across the political spectrum. So they don't put their money where their mouth is. They reject these sensible measures to protect working people in Dover and Deal. So I can't see anyone getting behind them after that, to be honest.
No, absolutely not. And I think that is kind of cutting through. People are rightly outraged by the fact that Reform are just willing to not even just gamble with the future of our public services, but genuinely just give up on them. There have been some interviewing of candidates of constituents in Runcorn, where there is going to be a by-election. And this was put to them saying, well, this is something that Nigel Farage is on record as saying he is open to, privatising the NHS. And I mean, that went down awfully, understandably. But some people, people are really actually now kind of catching on to the fact that Reform are not on their side when it comes to this. I think it is cutting through.
Yeah, don't vote for the guy that you want to go for a pint with. We saw what happened under Boris Johnson. It was an absolute disaster. Yeah, the guy might, have these gimmicky sort of, going and getting a tattoo. Get a tattoo then, Farage. Not a sort of transfer. That's childish, you know. I'd like to see him get a real tattoo. It's not going to happen, right? Because it's gimmicks.
Exactly.
Don't vote for that sort of person. Vote for someone who's serious about standing up for hard-working people, and that's what Labour do.
Exactly. It's a metaphor, sticking plaster, rather than actual long-term change.
I wish I'd thought of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was what I also thought when I saw that. I mean, they'll do anything for a photo op, they'll do anything for a video that goes viral on social media. You sit them down, you ask them, right, how are you going to sort out the problems, or even name the problems of this country, and then they struggle with that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then I think another thing, it's been a busy news week, and something actually that we did speak about previously, it has been this big row around two-tier law, basically, two-tier justice. Yeah. And the Sentencing Council proposed guidelines were understandably met with quite a lot of criticism. And I think it would be quite interesting, especially now with the Labour Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, stepping in and saying, I don't agree with this and I'm going to take action and basically put forward emergency legislation to block that. It'd be really interesting just to hear a bit about your experience as a Labour MP once this has happened. And I mean, what would you say to one of your constituents who says that we have a two-tier justice system?
We don't. And what we saw from the Sentencing Council with these guidelines essentially was that a judge would have access to information about someone's ethnicity and some other details as well. And that's irrelevant to someone sentencing. And what we didn't want to see was judges being more lenient on someone because of their ethnicity. That's not right, because that's not equal. Now, there's a good argument that there are far too many Black, Asian, or ethnic minorities in prison, but that's not the way of dealing with it. The way of dealing with it is looking at the socio-economic factors that are causing that and potentially policing, or I'd say more socio-economic factors. So it's a blunt instrument to say, I need to know your ethnicity, because if that's used to not put someone in prison who should be, that's absolutely disgraceful.
Dangerous.
It's dangerous, exactly. And Shabana Mahmood recognised this, and she said to the Sentencing Council, that's not acceptable, take that out the guidelines. And they had a period of time to do that. They came back, they didn't. So very quickly, she sprang into action and said, right, we're legislating for this, and we're going to pass a bill, because it's Parliament's responsibility to look after people and make sure that we have equality in that system. Now, that's not interfering with the independence of the judiciary, because they are still free to sentence as they see fit through the independent guidelines that they have. But the fact is, it's for Parliament to legislate to ensure that it remains equal for everybody. And that's what we're doing now. And I think it's important. There are factors where someone's position is important. And I think that's about vulnerability. So if you're pregnant, for example, then the judge should be made aware of that. Because what we don't want to see is this continuation of stillbirths and losses happening in prison. So vulnerability is different, but your ethnicity is completely irrelevant.
That's so important to differentiate between the two. And we have had a justice system that has been under so much burden and hasn't been given the support that it needs. I found it quite difficult to watch this become such a political football, and these accusations of a two-tier system being thrown against this government, which I think actually is taking really good action, really good steps to sort out the mess that it has inherited. And this does play into like a wider issue of, there are certain things I just don't think should be used as political footballs. And it's almost actually insulting to those of us who aren't politicians, because it's still something that we can all agree on. I think most people would say that they would disagree with what the Sentencing Council put out. And I think most people would agree with Shabana's actions. So for opposition parties to make this such a political issue, I just think it's cheap.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. And it's, look, when you haven't got policy, you're always looking for what they might see as a weakness to exploit. But actually, this country's judiciary and the rule of law is at the very heart of British values. And what we should be doing on that, if we truly love the country, is coming together and ensuring that we do the right thing, rather than trying to attack each other in Parliament. That doesn't go down with the public. That Robert Jenrick's exploited this because of the people behind him, because he wants to get rid of Kemi Badenoch and become the next leader.
Well, Robert Jenrick trying to spin this as some sort of win that he's brought about was insane.
I mean, the Conservatives waved this through, so this was quite literally their policy. Yeah. Incredible.
I find it really, really baffling. And you mentioned this point around division. When our country is in such a dire state, and it's been managed decline as well, there are people responsible, some people who are still in Parliament, still sitting in the opposition benches, who are responsible for the issues that we are facing. I mean, it's not the Tory politicians who are having to go through really long waiting times for appointments. They're not the ones who are suffering. No. So it has been even more frustrating just to watch everything become a kind of issue of division. And as you say, I mean, it's such a kind of a positive message that actually this is the time for us to unite over the important things. Of course, it's politics. Can't be naive about it. It's going to be division. Yeah. Labour and Tories, we're all going to disagree on certain things. But surely with these issues, we could actually find some common ground. I mean, that is what the public want.
Yeah, I think ideology is valid when it comes to things like where you're putting your money, where potential cuts might be, where you invest. Valid debate there, because it's important to hear all views. But when it comes down to the rule of law and justice and defence and defending the nation, those things should be across the board for what is right for this country. And any politician that does live by those British values will get behind it, and those that don't won't.
I couldn't agree more. Also, actually, just one thing that I was thinking about around Kemi Badenoch particularly, we talked a bit about reform, but going back to the Conservatives, Kemi was in the news recently over, not exactly a scandal, but some criticisms over the fact that she passed over her entire council tax bill to the taxpayer despite living in a house which is significantly more expensive than her maximum second home allowance. Her husband tops that up. And I just think that's another example of how they aren't willing to kind of play by the rules. They aren't willing to even live life like the rest of us, but they are willing to keep time and time again blocking the change that this government is actually putting forward, whether it's the Employment Rights Bill, recently the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, to kind of cut that red tape and allow us to build the homes that we really, really need. And housing, that's a huge topic we could talk about for a really long time. But I'm always frustrated when I see politicians consistently advocate against housing. Of course, it's important we have good quality homes and homes in the right places. But there is a pattern with certain parties. Yeah,
drop the NIMBYism. I tell you what, though, the Lib Dems are worse.
Oh, they are. Yeah, that's
they
true.
will jump on to any development and push back on it because I think most people have a bit of NIMBY in them. Because we don't like it in our backyards, right? But it's about seeing the bigger picture, and they exploit that. And it's the jobs of MPs now to say, no, we need to build. And look, I've had a development in my constituency with a group that are campaigning against it. And I've told them quite clearly that I support the development. But of course, we have to have the infrastructure to support it. So that there's enough school places, for example, the roads are fit for it. But we've got to, as MPs, get behind these and not see those cheap opportunities really.
Absolutely, and that, as you say, that's the role of an MP, and that's how an MP can actually help their community, rather than just saying no, but really invest in the future of the community. Yeah. And as you say, infrastructure is such a big part of it. Big housing developments shouldn't be going up without thinking about a health service or where the kids are going to go to school, roads as well, transport, that sort of stuff. We all have that responsibility to think about the future. Yeah. So it is reassuring to see that we now have MPs who are willing to engage constructively.
Look at the growth group, which I'm a part of, not particularly active, but a part of it. And that is a big group of MPs who are pushing for that development to actually happen. So we're not just talking about it. And I saw, I think, a tweet from Keir Starmer about overcoming the blockers to, I think it was Luton Airport, wasn't it? Yes,
and
I'd love to see that.
It was great. It was so just straight talking. Yeah, exactly. Not a long tweet, nothing too overly complicated, but get on with the job.
That's what we need to do.
Exactly. Well, I think that's the message we can take away, just get it done.
Absolutely.
Immigration, housing, justice. finally making progress. I'm quite jealous you're being of the fact that you're able to play such a big part in it. But it is so reassuring to see MPs like yourself at finally addressing these problems.
Well, it's an honour, because serving the country is vital, and we've got to be pushing the limits to make the progress that we failed to do after the last 14 years.
Absolutely. Mike, if there are any final things you want to say to our viewers as well, I know we always try to end on a kind of rallying cry of fighting the good fight.
May elections are coming up.
May elections.
Get out on the doors.
Yep.
Have some fun with it.
Yep.
And help us win.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to all of our viewers for watching, and we will see you again shortly for another episode of Tapp into Politics.